The proliferation of small arms and light weapons have accounted for the escalation and sometimes persistence of conflicts around the world, leading to injuries and deaths. In Nigeria, the scars of proliferation of small arms and light weapons are all over the areas that have encountered one conflict or the other. The United Nations estimates that there are no less than 350 million small arms and light weapons circulating in Nigeria, alleging that out of the 500 million weapons said to be in circulation in West Africa, 70% are in Nigeria. This figure has been rejected by the Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons, which is in the process of coming out with the correct figures. While this is ongoing, such weapons are said to be in use in the conflicts involving herdsmen and farmers. How can this situation be tackled? This is our focus on Nigeria Today. I am Shegun Ojelade. I'm being joined in the studio by two eminent gentlemen. I have with me Nkema Konam Dixon Oji, the programs coordinator of the Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons. I welcome you, Mr. Oji, to the program.
Thank you very much.
On his left is Usman Nasruddin. He is the Secretary General, Alumni Association of the National Institute. Annie, I welcome you to the program.
Thank you for having me.
He is a member of the National Institute. Once again, I welcome you, Usman, to the program.
Thank you very much.
Now, Dixon Oji, can we put into perspective the level of small arms and light weapons in circulation in Nigeria, bringing into mind the mop-up exercise by the police with just the expiration of the deadline, and then the enormous amount of weapons that the police recovered? Do we still have more out there?
Of course, we still have more out there. Excuse me, that's not in doubt. But the report of 350 million weapons in Nigeria, it means like saying 2 weapons per person, given the population of Nigeria. But I think the figure is exaggerated, actually. But I must tell you here that the Presidential Committee already conducted a survey, a comprehensive national small arms and light weapons survey. And then the report will be made open precisely on the 11th of June, when we intend to do a presentation on our findings. I think at that time, we'll be able to tell you the estimated weapons in wrong hands in Nigeria, because we are not talking about government stockpile. So if somebody says we have 350 million in Nigeria, I think it's
exaggerated.
Yes.
But does it reduce from the fact that we have a problem with small arms and light weapons?
No, not at all. We have a problem of small arms and light weapons in Nigeria. What we are talking about is the quantity, which has been exaggerated. But beyond that, from our porous borders to the activities of unscrupulous elements in the society, transborder criminals and all that, and of course the insurgency, the one that took place in Niger Delta in the past, the one that is presently happening in our northeastern flank, we have weapons in Nigeria. Nigeria is awash with weapons.
Okay.
And
Usman Nasruddin, you just finished a kind of dialogue, stakeholders meeting, conference in Abuja with the Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons on this issue that we're talking about. What were those things that underscored that interaction?
Well, thank you very much. You'll agree with me that today one of the most serious challenges this nation faces is about security. We're just trying to sigh some relief with what the government said, decimation of the Boko Haram insurgency. But all of a sudden, another monster is running its head. The conflict between the herders and farmers, which ordinarily is not something to be too much worried about because it has been with us for quite some time. But the dimension is taken using heavy or sophisticated weapons is what is quite worrisome. And so it underscored the need to really understand the nature of the conflict itself, because a number of issues are being brought in to mask the actual nature of the conflict. And if you don't understand the problem, it's almost impossible for you to get the right solution. And therefore, we felt it is important for us as Alumni Association of the National Institute to partner with sister organizations like the Presscom to convene a dialogue so that we can actually provide a platform that we can actually be able to understand the nature of this conflict and prefer solution. But I can assure you there are a lot of criminalities that have gained access into this conflict which ordinarily should have been resolved. So that is the focus.
I do agree with you that we are yet to fully understand or to underscore the nature and what is fueling the conflict. Many of us don't actually know. From the dialogue that we've had, what are the real issues?
Well, essentially, I mean, in any conflict, there are underlying factors that give rise to the conflict, but there are conflict escalators.
Yeah.
Ordinarily, the conflict between herders and farmers is a resource-based conflict. The herder wants to have a place to graze his cattle, but the farmer will always want to protect his crop. Essentially, there are conflicts. Sometimes the herd will stray into the farmland and destroy the crop of the farmer, and conflict ensued. But we've always had a traditional mechanism to address this. Unfortunately, like I've said earlier, beyond this, a lot of things are coming in. Criminality has taken over, whereby you have murderous activities going all over, and reprisals and counter-reprisals using sophisticated weapons. Unfortunately, the ambers of ethnicity and religion and even politicization of the conflict has further escalated the nature of the conflict. So what we try to do is to really sift out the actual causes of the conflict in terms of competition for resources, so that those things could be addressed, and the criminal aspect of it could be sifted out and be dealt with as pure criminal issues.
Okay. Yeah. Now, how can we have peace? How can we have less of conflict and clashes, especially herdsmen and the farmers, when guns are still in wrong hands? There was a mop-up exercise carried out by the Nigerian police. To what extent is the Presscom, like he just called you, your agency, to what extent were you involved, and how do you see that exercise going forward?
Well, thank you very much. Going forward, the initiative by the Nigerian police is a commendable one, but I think that police should involve more stakeholders. We were not directly involved when this last one took place. I think they should expand the scope by involving more people, more stakeholders who can assist in this. I tell you, in 2016 and 2017, we convened a meeting of all security advisors to the 36 state governors here in Abuja. And we're talking about civilian disarmament at the state level. Because it's not an Abuja thing. You can sit there in Abuja and talk and make all the noise, except you go down to the grassroots, you cannot get results. When Benue State government called us to assist them in their amnesty program, we went there, we provided technical assistance to them, we recovered weapons, and we destroyed over 600 weapons in Benue. We were called also in Katsina. We went to Katsina, we also assisted them to destroy over 500 weapons. As we speak, we are working with Zamfara State government, and we have about 5,000 weapons to be destroyed this May. So we are calling on state governors to join hands. I'm not talking about amnesty, we're talking about civilian disarmament. Because when you talk about amnesty, they think you want to keep some people and be paying them stipends monthly.
Yes.
That is not the case here. The case here is civilian disarmament. Luckily, we have a project under the ECOWAS EU Small Arms Control Program where we are able to provide alternative livelihood for those who are being disarmed. This is happening currently at the pilot stage in 7 states, 5 states from the northwest and 2 states in the south-south, just for the pilot phase. And in each state, we are taking 200 people for the first year and another 200 for the second year. In return for the weapons they voluntarily surrender, we are providing them alternative livelihood, not giving them money for arms. Because when you give them money, they go back to buy more arms. Or provide them alternative livelihood, train them on what they can do for themselves in the future, provide them the enablement to start. I believe that this disarmament program should be expanded. I believe that the state government should be, up to local government, should be involved, because there's a little confidence building in this. You can't go to Abuja to convince somebody there at the grassroots to submit his arms. Some of them will ask you, who are you? And what do you have in stock for them? So that's why the critical aspect of this is the alternative livelihood.
I was just about asking you, who are those submitting or bringing their arms? Are they the real criminals? Are they hunters? What kind of weapons are you getting? Because some of the weapons that I have seen are probably day guns or locally fabricated firearms. The AK-47 are very few, or the pump action gun, or those sophisticated ones that we learned that these criminals do carry in the bush.
Yes, you're correct, because but to answer your question directly, we have categories of miscreants. The insurgents, the militancy that took place in the Niger, those ones have very sophisticated weapons. But you see, these things are peculiar to each state. For instance, when we got to Akwa Ibom State, we discovered that the issue of insurgency and militancy is number 4. The very first priority in Akwa Ibom State, or the very first sensitive problem in Akwa Ibom State, is cultism.
Wow.
And they, up to primary school level, they don't have sophisticated weapons, but they still have weapons to bring in. And then the militants we discussed with in Cross River State, for instance, are ready, as we speak, to surrender very sophisticated weapons that will surprise you. In Benue, we had substantial number of those kind of weapons you're talking about, in Katsina also. But overall, between Katsina, Zamfara, and Benue, we have about 75% locally produced weapons, and then about 25% factory weapons. But you will be surprised when you see those local fabrications.
Yes, I was told that there are people in this country that
there are good copies of those imported weapons, and they use the same ammunition.
Okay, it's an issue for another day, because these are local technologies that can be harnessed for productive uses. Abi?
Yeah, we said to them, if you could copy an AK-47 and make it almost similar, why don't you, like my colleague will always say, why won't you give you a KK NAPEP and ask you to look at it and try to copy something like that? Or give you a motorbike and ask you to try to copy something like that? Or
even take him as a national asset and be making good guns for our military and the police?
Yeah, unfortunately, the one being produced in Daikon is not being patronized by our local forces.
That's an issue for another day. Now, before we go on break, let's talk about some of those things that, some of the takeaways of your dialogue, because we should be talking about solutions now. We may not be able to complete it before we go on break, but what are some of the recommendations that can halt this menace?
Well, like I've said from the beginning, I think the first thing we need to do in this conflict is proper categorization of the conflict. Let us understand that there is a conflict because conflict is natural among human beings, but the violent conflict is what really is something else. So the conflict between the herders and farmers is something that is natural because of competition for resources. And over the years, because of the climate change, there is a serious desertification which force the herdsmen to move down southwards. But beyond that, I think government has been paying lip service to this issue because, like we found out today in the conference, there is no any comprehensive policy framework on livestock in this country. Everything when government talks about agriculture, is about cropping. So one of the takeaway is government must fashion out a national policy on livestock, because a number of countries who have much less number of stock than Nigeria, if you see the contribution of livestock to their GDP is amazing. So it is important that government put a lot of attention on that, and this will entail.
I will just call for a very short break. You continue along that line when we do come back.
Thank you.
The program is Nigeria Today. We're taking a look at the proliferation of small arms and light weapons against the backdrop of the conflict and clashes that we have in this country that has claimed many lives. We'll take a short break, but while we're on break, Nigerians speak.
I think our borders have been very porous for quite a long time. Most especially from the northeast, the northern regions have very porous borders. You know, you even find out, even in the case of buying vehicles, you go down south, semi-border is strict, but you come towards the north, very porous. So it's easy for one to smuggle any kind of weapon from, let's say, Chad into Maiduguri and some other borders like that.
The problem of insecurity is very alarming, and it boils down to lack of employment, especially to the youth who are supposed to use their time to do meaningful things. Society should not leave everything in the hands of the government. We, the common men or the people in our neighborhood, anytime you see any movement or anything that is not what you normally see people do, or people coming around your neighborhood that you don't know where they are coming from, I think it's good for us to alert the security operatives, because they are not magicians.
The government can help and maybe create job opportunity for some graduates and others.
You're welcome back. The program Nigeria Today continues. Now, before we went on that break, Usman, you were talking about some of the takeaways from the dialogue that just ended in Abuja this evening. You were talking about government making greater plans for livestock production in the country, as much as is being done to cropping.
Yeah, just like I've said, there is need for government to put more attention to livestock. And we all know, when government talks of intervention in agriculture, is usually limited to cropping, whether in terms of machinery, improved seedlings, fertilizer, etc. And I think the alternatives to the nomadic pastoralism, all the alternatives, whether ranching or cattle colony or whatever it might be called, from what we understand, it will require a lot of capital, which the individual herdsmen may not be able to afford. So we think government must come out with some investment in the facilities, whether you're going to have a common ranch or a common cattle colony, that investment in terms of pasture and water will be available, veterinary services, and that could also serve as a revenue earner for government. Okay. Then, of course, the private sector must have to be brought in. Now, this will be dealt with in the broad policy framework, because it has to be addressed in the short, medium, and long term. Okay. But beyond that, what we are seriously concerned with today is the killings must have to be stopped. Yes. Because there is no way you can have any development in a country when you have women and children being butchered. Even chickens, there is a better way of killing them. So we feel that all the grandstanding must have to be dropped. We revert back to our traditional mechanism for conflict resolution and address that conflict. Okay. But of course, the criminality in it must have to be dealt with as a criminal activity, and that is why the security agencies must have to come heavy on that.
Okay, you know, the killings must stop, But we need to know what is fueling the killings. When criminals are on the rampage, dialogue may not work, because you are talking to people that have made up their mind to go into criminality. That brings me to the issue of working together among the various security apparatus. You just said that when the police carried out the mop-up exercise, your agency was not involved. How can we ensure greater effectiveness in security in this country through collaboration and the close working together of the various security arms?
One of the major key objectives of PRESCOM is to ensure capacity enhancement for security agencies. So far, from 2013 till date, we have provided opportunities to enhance the capacities of the security agencies in various aspects of what we are talking about. Now, we have also conducted trainings on collaborative policing, interagency relationship, because sometimes we see that agencies want to take credit for what they have done.
Yes.
But we need synergy more than that fight and that taking glory. When we achieve result, it should go to all the security agencies who have come together to achieve that result. We are not singling out any particular agency to give them kudos. We should just give kudos to the security agencies, because now we have joint task forces, and all agencies contribute their men and officers to those task forces. So if they succeed in doing something, we should give all of the credit goes to everybody. So no one agency should feel more important than the other. And then just like one of the heads of the agency said once, he said that security operatives or security agencies are like goalkeepers. I think I said it the last time. Yes. The goalkeeper can stop all the shots, but if he lets one goal in, that could be the decider for the match. Yes. So one single error could lead to devastation, and that is what should be avoided by all means.
Now, going forward, because the problem is still there, what are those things that from your agency you feel must be quickly put in place to halt this carnage?
I think one of the most important things in our mind now is how to advise government on technology. Our borders are porous, and if, like we always say, if all our security agencies come together and hold their hands, they can't cover the landmass called Nigeria. So we need technology. We need to deploy technology. In the northern Nigeria alone, we have over 1,500 kilometers that is open, that people walk in and out from. Again, our neighbors are like us. If you enter the streets of Niamey, you can speak Hausa language, and everybody there understands you. If from the Benin side, you enter there, you speak your Yoruba freely. From Cameroon, Taraba, Axis, you just enter freely. So we have our neighbors who are not helping matters, because criminal elements easily come into Nigeria from those angles. So we need technology deployed in our borders to be able to combat this issue of armed proliferation. Otherwise, there will always be leakages, because we have large landmass.
Okay. Your final word on the program, especially along the line of what must we do quickly to stop these deaths?
Well, I think I would say our politicians must have to realize that it's a matter of life that is involved in this, and stop politicization of this process. I think there are a number of flashpoints, particularly Plateau State, whereby very good conflict resolution mechanism have been adopted and peace have been restored. So I will advise that in the flashpoints that we have now, the traditional institutions, the religious institutions, community leaders must all be brought to bear and stop the carnage. That is in the short term. In the long term, because there are some allegations some of these herdsmen are coming from outside the country, is because we are poorly, in fact we are not implementing the ECOWAS protocol on transhumance. Because if our neighbors are coming in with their cattle, they are supposed to come with a certificate. Nobody is asking anything, so anybody can come in and do what he wants and get away in this country. So I think in the long term we have to address the causes of the competition for resources, like I've said earlier, we have to address the influx of foreign herdsmen by full implementation of the ECOWAS protocol on transhumance.
Okay.
Then above all, we must have to, the security agencies in particular must have to identify the criminal elements in this and they must have to be dealt with accordingly.
Okay. I must thank you, Secretary General of the Alumni Association of the National Institute, Usman Nasiruddin. I thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you, welcome.
I also wish to say thank you, Dixon Oji, Program Coordinator, Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons. Thank you for all your comments.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
This is where we call it a date on the program Nigeria Today. Until we come your way, and that will be tomorrow with yet another edition of the program. I am Shegun Ojelade. Bye-bye.